side of Alabama's capital city leads into the busiest residential driveway in the state. White pillars frame the entranceway to the official state-owned home of the Governor of Alabama. About 40,000 people a year come to this 64-year-old house to see its impressive architecture and to catch a glimpse of what life is like in the Governor's mansion. Tonight, this special program will take you on a tour of the mansion, showing its history, the behind-the-scenes rooms, usually closed to the public, and the 7 members of the George Wallace family who live here.
Hello, Barbara. Hi. Good to see you. Come on, follow you.
Mrs. Wallace, were you ever in this home before you were the Governor's wife?
Yes, Barbara. Before the house was purchased, and I was living on South Perry Street in the old Governor's mansion with my uncle, Governor Folsom. We walked down this street, and we stopped in front of it, and my uncle said, "How do you like this house?" And my 2 cousins, Rachel and Melissa, and I said, "We love it." And I said, "I think it ought to be the Governor's mansion." And he said, "Well, let's go inside." So we came to the door, and we were greeted by the butler, and I think his name was Buster. And the Liggins were away in Europe. Ms. Liggin was with it then. She was away in Europe, and we came in, and everything in the house was covered with big dust covers. And as a child, to come into a house and see all this mammoth furniture covered with dust covers, it was quite impressive. But he gave us some lemonade, and then my uncle came back later and talked to Ms. Liggin about purchasing the home for the state governor's mansion.
Well, actually, the house has quite a history to it, perhaps not as many antique pieces as you would like to have in it. I think one of the things that's so interesting is the staircase and the chandelier that's above it.
Well, this staircase, I guess you've probably seen many times in the newspaper as the queens of the various balls come here, and they are photographed on these staircases. We always have the Mardi Gras queen, but I think we probably have 5 or 6 or 8 queens a year that come here to have their pictures made on these staircases. So we're right proud that they think they're that pretty and that they do come and use them and enjoy them. The chandelier came from a hotel in New Orleans, and the sconces did too, and the chandelier in the dining room matches this one. This small chandelier in the entrance hall was in the old governor's mansion, and it was moved down here when they purchased this house in 1950. Barbara, would you like to come in the First Lady's parlor?
Well, thank you. Has it always been called the First Lady's parlor?
No, this was a small receiving room, and at one time these were used as bookcases, and the woodwork in here was underneath the paint is a walnut or a dark mahogany. And of course, as trends changed, everybody lightened up their rooms. But Ms. Brewer hung the portraits of all the first ladies who had lived in this governor's mansion.
And that probably adds a touch of history to the mansion and to the room as the First Lady's parlor.
Well, I think it's the first time the first ladies had that recognition.
Is this Mrs. Persons?
Yes, this is Governor Gordon Persons' wife. Mrs. Persons was the first lady to occupy this home.
And of course, she's still living.
Yes.
And Mrs. Wallace, this portrait, of course, is someone you know very well.
Yes, this is my aunt, Jamel Folsom, Governor Folsom's wife, and they were the second family to live in this house.
Mrs. Folsom was one of the governor's wives that lived in both mansions.
That's right.
In the one at 702 Perry?
That's right.
How do you compare that house to this house?
Well, Barbara, the other house was a beautiful home. It was beautiful on the inside, but the outside was a sort of a yellow, dingy brick, and it was not the colonial Greek revival structure that this is. And it did not typify the old southern plantation type home. And but the inside was very nice, and it was furnished nicely, and the appointments were very nice.
And actually, you would know firsthand, because you also are a governor's wife who lived in both houses, but you were a child then.
Well, I think it was more fun as a child.
The other wives that are hanging in this First Lady's parlor in this new mansion all were occupants of this home. Who are they?
Well, this is Mrs. John Patterson, Mary Jo Patterson, and she's still living here in Montgomery. And I know Miss Patterson and Governor Patterson, and their daughter has done some babysitting for me before, Babel. And then, of course, Governor Lurleen Wallace she is the only one of the First Ladies who is not still living. And this picture was when she was the First Lady rather than when she was governor.
And then, of course, Mrs. Brewer comes in.
Yes, and Ms. Albert Brewer. Martha is the one that initiated this idea of hanging the portraits of the First Ladies here. And we just hung mine last week.
Oh, did you?
Yes.
And I have to ask you, what are you going to do for the next First Lady? It seems as though you're out of room.
Well, I hope they'll continue to move them around into the house, because I really think it's appropriate that the ladies' portraits should be hung here.
And this, of course, is what we would call the state dining room.
That's right, Barbara. This is where we have our state dinners and any entertaining that we do, formal entertaining we do here in this dining room. Of course, we have our teas in here, too. When it's fully extended, Barbara, this table would seat 18 people.
Well, now, the china that's on the table today is the official state china.
Yes, this is the Lenox tuxedo pattern, and it bears the state coat of arms. And we have some other serving pieces, but we have service for 48 in this pattern.
Have you ever used the 48 since you've been in the mansion?
No. We used this china when Senator Humphrey was here for his committee meetings. And we had Senator Humphrey, we had Senator Allen from Alabama, we had Senator Herman Talmadge from Georgia, and we had Senator Curtis, and the governor and I at this table. But we have not used the whole complete service.
Mrs. Wallace, governor's wives always seem to be having a problem with getting enough money to furnish the mansion and to keep it the way they would like to keep it. I understand this Silver Service has an interesting story of how one governor's wife solved her problem. Perhaps we can tell it together.
Well, that's right, Barbara. Mrs. Dixon was asked by her husband to entertain the legislature for breakfast. And she said, well, Frank, I can't. We don't have enough coffee cups, we don't have enough plates, we don't have enough of anything that's proper and would be appropriate to serve them in. She said, this is all I have, and she showed him an enamel coffee pot from the kitchen. He said, well, I don't care, we just have to entertain them, so you just do the best you can, I'm bringing them out. So they came out for breakfast, and she came out with her enamel coffee pot from the kitchen. And the legislators took pity on it and appropriated $10,000. And with that, Ms. Dixon purchased this lovely service and some other nice pieces that are here in the mansion that we'll see later. Barbara, I'd like to show you some silver we have here that has historical significance to all Alabamians. This was on the USS Battleship Alabama and was presented to the people of Alabama in 1942 in honor of the officers and men that protect the honor of our country in peace and war. And all of the punch cups have the state seal and USS Alabama engraved on them.
Did the candlesticks also come as a part of this gift?
Yes, the candlesticks came at the same time, were presented at the same time, and they have the United States of America Navy Department and the same State Seal and USS Alabama battleship.
And of course, this is the ship which is located as a museum down in Mobile now.
Yes, it's open to tourists, and the funds were raised, you know, by the school children. I think they raised $1 million in donations to bring the battleship back to Alabama. Mm-hmm. How's your chicken salad coming, Strawberry?
It's fine, Miss Brown.
Good.
And what are you fixing over there? Some salad?
Hey, go get him, Leo, go get him! Go, go! Go!
How do you like being the governor's son? Is it different?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. It's a lot different because well, it's in a big yard and there's guards all around it.
But is it sort of fun being somebody special?
Yeah, it's just like regular with the father and mother, but in the house it's not regular because there's people downstairs and you can't play that much downstairs. Like once I slid down the banisters, and when I got on the curb, some people came out and looked up, so I ran upstairs.
I don't blame you. Thank you both, Jim and Josh.
You're welcome.
Play very well. Do you practice every day after school?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you ever play for your mom and some of her friends?
Oh, yes, ma'am. I play for Ortiz.
Do you?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, how long have you been taking?
Oh, since last year.
Goodness. Would you rather play the organ or would you rather rush out and ride your horse?
Well, it depends. I know I like to ride my horse and play the organ.
Lee, now that you're back in the mansion, do you feel like this was your home?
Yes, ma'am.
Because you lived here for quite a while, huh?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you and your brothers ever slide down the banisters or things like that?
Yes, ma'am.
What else do you do?
Well, we usually play army out in the backyard, and, you know, when we had our ponies over here, and we used to ride horses out in the backyard. And we just play around.
Is it a good house for hide and seek?
Yes, ma'am.
I understand there's some football games that your brothers play on Tuesday and Thursday.
Well, just let them ask them that tomorrow as they slide down.
You've been keeping your lips in mine. Yeah. Ooh, this feeling's killing me.
child, and my late mother was very interested in it, and my daddy and stepmother now are very interested in it, and so that kind of influenced me.
Peggy, you live out here in what was formerly the guest house. This must have been sort of a major decision to decide to move out of the mansion itself.
No, not really. It started out as a joke. I mentioned it one day that would be really nice since I'd be turning 21 in January, and then just kind of developed, and here I am.
Isn't it an ideal setup for the young 21-year-old?
Oh, it's great. I recommend it for every 21-year-old.
Mrs. Wallace, this is indeed a large, magnificent home. How many people does it take you to keep it clean and maintained?
Well, Barbara, we have a staff of about 8 servants to keep the house.
Oh, I wish I had that much help myself.
This is the former living room, and these are the original mirrors that came in the house. And as you can see, they're built so that they're curved and fit up into the ceiling, and they're gold leaf. And we call them the mirrors of infinity because they reflect into each other, into infinity.
Back and forth and back and forth.
Yes, and Mrs. Ligon had a tete-a-tete chair that was here, and you could sit, and as you talked, you could look into the mirrors.
And the furniture in this room, is this part of the original furnishings?
Well, this furniture was made by the Victorian Furniture Company here in Montgomery, and it is the largest company for reproductive Victorian antiques in the world, and I'm not sure, but I feel that they probably donated these Victorian pieces to the mansion.
Mrs. Mrs. Wallace, have you ever stopped to think about what it must have been like when you were a child and lived in the other mansion? Did you ever daydream that you might one day be the governor's wife?
No, Barbara, I really did not.
When you walked with your uncle and you...
Come in.
Hello.
Hey, darling. You know Barbara Furlow?
Barbara.
Good to see you, Governor Wallace.
Home for lunch.
Oh, do you get to come home every day for lunch?
Almost every day. Almost every day.
Governor Wallace, do you all ever use these rooms as a family just to come in and sit down and chat?
Well, last Sunday we did. We had all of his family, the Wallaces, about, how many, George, 75?
But usually we don't sit in this room too much. It's mighty big and nice, but I sit in a more compact, closer place. But it's beautiful, and we sit here when people come to visit us, yes.
Do you get together with the children? Do you try once a day to get together with the children and have a family time?
Oh, yes, we see each day, and I try to get home for lunch at a time that I will be here when they get home from school.
So that you do get to be a father because you're so busy being a governor.
Well, they are very busy, but not too busy to be with the children. I think that's an important function of being governor, is to be with your children also.
Mrs. Wallace, you have wanted some type of a commission appointed to oversee the restoration of the mansion and the collection of pieces for the mansion. And I understand this is one of the first pieces that you've collected.
Yes, Barbara, this is an Italian Capodimonte cane stand, and it was donated to the governor's mansion by the Women's Association, University Association in Birmingham, at an antique show they had, and it's valued at $450. And this is the first piece that I've collected as a donation that will be here permanently for the mansion. Barbara, this is a piece that was purchased by Mrs. Dixon when she bought the antiques with her appropriation. And this was in the old governor's mansion. And as a small child, I remembered this piece so well because it makes into a desk. And of course, at 8 years old, I was about like this, and I thought this was a secret hideaway that nobody knew about but me. And so when I came back over and found this, I felt real at home to find this same piece that had been in the other governor's mansion. Barbara, this is our sun parlor, and we use the sun parlor now to display art. This is a project by the Alabama Council on Arts and Humanities, and they have a committee, and every 3 months they select a painting and a piece of sculpture and put it on display here at the mansion. This is a fiberglass piece of work that's done with fiberglass over cheesecloth. It's called the Ballerina, and it was done by Colonel Whitehead here in Montgomery.
You have been very interested in trying to have something done so that the mansion will be a permanent place for the people of Alabama. In your pursuit of this, do you feel as though it should be the job of the wife of the governor to come in and to decorate the mansion to her desires each time, or how do you feel about this?
Well, Barbara, my main interest was that the Alabama Historical Society would put the house and the furnishings under the Alabama Historical Commission so that the house would be protected and the furnishings would be protected, and the museum curator would oversee this. And I think probably because I lived in the mansion 21 years ago, and I saw one mansion, governor's mansion, completely destroyed, and many of the furnishings transferred or moved or just worn out and not replaced, that I felt that somebody else should have the responsibility. And I feel that it's too much of a responsibility, as big as the place is, for one person to try to take it on as their responsibility.
There's one question that I must ask in closing, Mrs. Wallace. Would you like to be the wife of the President of the United States?
Well, I'd just like to be the wife of George Wallace.
So if he happens to be president, you'll go along?
Whichever way he goes. I just want to go with him.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Barbara, and I enjoyed it.